How's it going? Good?
Good.
Um, Any public comment?
Nope.
No? You guys just assumed there would be no public comment? All right, so we'll just move on into things. Action items. Can I get a motion for the... First of all, before we have a motion, are there any questions regarding the purchasing agenda? And Larry has some things to discuss in relationship to it. Questions about that?
Yeah, sure. I did just have a question about the increase in Canary Consulting, so just looking for some background on the increase there.
Yeah, we had engaged Canary to both, this is going back maybe initially a couple of years ago, first of all, help with some strategic planning around our fundraising efforts.
Right.
And as you recall, we signed an agreement, more collaborative agreement with the Student Advancement Foundation, so our joint fundraising is to be more collaborative. And then they provided a staff person for the XQ grant that coordinated all the groundwork that went into completing that grant application. And since we were awarded that, there continues to be a lot of after stuff that we have to take care of. We have yet to receive any dollars from them. They admittedly are a little disjointed early on, this being the first year that they've done this. So we need to continue to use, his name's Josh, on XQ related issues. And then the Wallace Foundation grant that we initially got a planning grant of $400,000 of the city, I believe it was last fall or late last summer. And we're in the process of putting together an application for their larger grant of $10 million. And so Canary is also going to help with that.
Okay.
Now, some of that, probably of the increase of $60,000, probably all but 10 grand will be reimbursed by XQ and or the Wallace Foundation.
Okay.
So there's probably net 10 grand out of the Board of Education funds. We have the ability to charge those kinds of expenses back into the grant.
The grant award.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Great.
Yeah, so one of the things I asked Larry to do in these kinds of situations is that we discuss, fund balance implications of increased. Mm-hmm. So this obviously has a small amount. The other thing that Larry and I discussed is the idea, and I wouldn't mind having, obviously this would need to be Teresa, John, and the board, but if we do this yearly, if we often create consulting contracts that connect to communications, et cetera, that we look into whether or not we need a new staff person to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
Or grants writing.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, because a grant writer, and there's grant writing that's now done by consultants and people within house that may be taking away from the job that they're do. So I don't know how to.
I will say, we're obviously still very actively working on the 17-18 budget. In fact, there was a big meeting this morning, and a separate conversation with Teresa earlier this afternoon as we work toward completing that budget. And as usual, we start out with shortfalls in our projections. Sure. So we really are looking at ways, and we've actually had, prior to our meeting, Dr. Baker, we've had some discussions internally in the business office about this whole grant writing scenario. So yeah, in fact, we'll be looking at that right now in connection with this year's budget to see what makes sense financially.
Yeah, I think
more sense financially, yeah.
So will grant administration then, the reporting out, fall back into the district, or will we continue to?
Well, head of our OIS, Walter DeBoer, is our grant writer, has been our grant writer. Admittedly, this past year and a half, we've had a lot more activity,
right.
Many larger grants. Since he became head of OIS, I don't know, a year and a half ago, his responsibilities expanded also. So up until that point in time, my understanding is before my time, Walter could handle most of the grant writing, but we've been much more active and with this additional responsibilities. So yeah, it's another time to take a look at it again, and from all aspects. I believe the ISD has grant writers too. Maybe it's a joint collaborative with them.
Yep.
Anyways, that makes the most sense in terms of getting the work out and minimizing our costs certainly, but having quality work done, timely work done, which is imperative in grant applications. So.
Great, thank you for that background.
Yeah, this reminds me of when we did in-house attorneys rather than just, we used to spend a lot of money
Yeah.
on attorney fees, and that's dropped a lot because we're not.
With Sharon in place, yeah.
Because with Sharon in place,
Yeah.
we don't need to farm out so much stuff. And, I don't know if it makes sense, because this is certainly less than hiring out
Salary,
a legal
right.
consultant. But if we're doing this often and we're doing it less well than we could with our own staff, then.
Yeah.
It's good that you guys are considering it, so. Any other questions on the purchasing agenda?
No.
All right, motion to move this, do we need, again, I keep forgetting, do we just decide, we do vote, okay?
We do.
Okay, motion to move this forward to the full board for consideration.
Support?
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. Donations.
Yeah, there are, what do we have here, a couple donations in your packet, one from Park Church, one from Rose Enders, and I understand Ms. Enders has provided funding for these kinds of activities in the past. And then there is an amount from the Carl's Foundation, $103,000. I explained to Dr. Baker, we met on Thursday, and I'll mention to this Finance Committee, as you know, we have a policy that requires that we make the board aware of grants in excess of $100,000 that we intend to apply for. I will tell you that we did not do this with this because none of us knew about it. One of Laura's staff persons took it upon herself, to her credit, found this, and we were awarded it, so it'll go, as you can see there, for the oral deaf program. So my apologies for not getting it to you ahead of time, but we didn't know it. As much as we have controls in place to try to minimize it, it's still a big district, and we can't always keep track of what's going on. But nonetheless, we were awarded it, and it's for a worthy cause, certainly.
Absolutely.
So those are the three items of donation that meet the threshold for needing board approval.
Yeah, and for the oral deaf donation, the policy of requiring board approval was really based on the idea that we could be committing ourselves to do something that we wouldn't typically do without the grant money. And in this case, it's clear that, we're not. So I think that this one instance, we can let it slide. So.
Again, just clarify, the policy doesn't require approval, it just requires us notifying. the board.
Notification,
Yeah.
yes, I'm sorry. But we do have to approve.
You have to approve the acceptance, exactly.
That's okay,
Yeah.
so we were not informed, but it was, again, to raise questions about whether or not we're going to approve it, and
That's right.
because it requires us to do something completely different, so a motion to support moving this to the full board.
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. So that included the Carl's one.
Yeah, and I see the
Wallace
Wallace
grant,
Grant
yeah.
Consultant that was on the purchasing agenda you just approved. That's just some additional information on what that $50,000 is being spent. As I mentioned, that it's funded by the Wallace Grant, so that does not come out of our general board funds, but just some additional information for you there in your packet with respect to that Wallace Grant Consultant.
Okay, so that means that we're done with the action items. February financial statements.
Financial statements, again, the front statement is the dashboard. That report went over yesterday. A couple things I'll Just want to point out this month, again, we've left the projected fund balance unchanged from last month, about 12.1 million, 8.87%. I just quickly review as we focus on fund balance, and this will be obviously become a issue of discussion as we look to the 17-18 budget when we get that to you here in the next, I guess, 60 days is where we stand now, the end of March. In 2015, new legislation was passed at the state level called known as early warning legislation, and the intent was to provide the state, in this case, Department of Treasury, additional tools for identifying school districts that may have fiscal challenges, and the Treasury is given significant leeway in terms of what kinds of measurements and operating financial metrics they could look at. However, there was one specific metric that was actually in the law, that's this fund balance notion. And the law itself said that 5% is a minimum. If districts fall below 5%, and that may be the only reason maybe the only factor that they are not in accordance with. Rockford, as an example, has never had a 5% fund balance. They purposely choose to spend below that. As we all know, Rockford is not in any but they're not going to go under, so to speak. No risk there, but because they're under 5%, it triggered the first reporting requirement. And so if you're below 5%, or if there's other factors that are triggered, and the Treasury looks at things like trend information the last 3 to 4 years, enrollment, deficit budgets, those kinds of things. So those can trigger a review also, but the 5%, it was in the law. If you go below that, it triggers additional reporting requirements initially, and a plan to get above it. And at some point, if you can't get above that plan, or above the 5%, then you have to bring in either an outside consultant or the ISD to do an operational review. Point being is the state, the Treasury Department in particular, becomes your best friend and really interferes in local control of the district. So that's why we focus on that fund balance so much, and the 5% as a board and as a district, and we try to minimize the amount of involvement the state has in our day-to-day operations. They certainly have enough in the regulatory environment that we operate in now. So 5% is the minimum. Last year at budget time, and I guess all three of you were around then, we had a significant number of discussions surrounding the fund balance, and we got to the budget. 5% was the limit, and we changed the board policy to mimic that, but there was the board thought, just to be safe, that maybe 6%, although not would be a safe minimum. Board policy says between 5 and 15% with a 10% goal. So realistic, the board said, let's not get below 6%, but we can't go down to 5%. So that's the whole history, if you will, of the continued focus on fund balance. And why 5%? That is in the law, and the Treasury does have to initiate additional reporting requirements if you're below 5%. So the other thing I want to point out, I mentioned this last month. If you look down at the end of the page there, you see capital expenditures, and the bond-related capital expenditures. I think last month it was maybe in the neighborhood of $3 million, and now it's up to 9.2. For the year, and in the middle column there, you see the 12,086 million. That's how much we spent on the bond. So it was up significantly. All the new computers we bought for staff hit in February. Some additional expenditures on the construction side. So as I said last month, you'll see that bond spending will continue to jump over the next number of months as we ramp up our construction projects in the summertime. And we'll continue to buy technology now that staff has been bought for students to begin distributing new student technology next fall. So And then the enrollment information at the bottom there, again, that's just a head count at the end of the month, just for comparative purposes. You can see year over year, in February, there was an increase. As we know, we had an increase in enrollment this year, so. And then behind the dashboard is all the detail information for those that take a look in more detail in the financial information, so. Any questions on the financial statements?
The fund balance.
Yes.
So I did ask Larry to go over that, and I actually, I know that you guys know it well, Christian, I wanted to know, and then, but just
Yeah.
making sure that the board
Yeah.
as a whole understands this, and so when we have this board meeting, I'll ask him, again, we keep talking about it. But in dollar figures, so what would a variance of 1% of our fund balance mean in terms of actual dollars,
Well,
ballpark?
Yeah, well, the revenue, about 1.4 million.
So, 1.4
1.4 million, yeah,
per 1%.
per 1%
So-
approximately, yeah.
So.
Again, let me just clear, it's 5% of unrestricted general fund
Right.
dollars. Our total general fund revenue is 206 million, but of the unrestricted portion of that is about 140 million or thereabouts, I think.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so, which means that, and making sure I ask this question in a way that doesn't sound like lobbying, would the enhancement millage occur, then that would presumably, with nothing else changing, that would be an equivalent of about 2% of our fund balance, would that be correct? A
it,
little over
probably
2%?
2.5%, yeah.
2.5%,
2.5%, yeah.
So,
Yep.
so that's a good thing to think about. That's why asking questions about that $50,000 that John wants to spend is appropriate to do. So I want to know where that's going. So, all right, John could just work more hours. If there are any left.
I gotta say, I think John works 25 hours a day, so.
Yeah, he might not have any left, so anyway. All right, any? Warm, safe, dry update.
The warm, safe, dry summary sheet and backup is in there. I should note that both Ottawa and the pool handler replacement and the Franklin campus data center, those will be phasing out as soon as we close the paperwork. With the warm, safe, and dry not renewed, Ridgemore is on there. We'll do that out of warm, safe, and dry. We will have a couple other projects coming on this summer, the main one being the central gym roof replacement. But this will shrink down. We do have a little of the funding left for emergencies. There is not a requirement timeline when to spend it. So we've saved a little bit just in case a boiler fails, a roof fails, something like that. But you'll see this one kind of phasing out. On the bond side, we did put the bond planning sheet back in the packet. That will change. One difference I'll make from now on is I'll highlight whatever line item changes, so you're aware. I looked at it and I had trouble finding it again. It's just some dates. I should note that museum, we have bid the demolition and abatement. That work will start it was in the purchasing agenda, so when that's approved by the full board, that will start in April. And then the main package will come later this summer. And Buchanan, we will be bidding in April, and it will come to the May Finance Committee for the Buchanan project.
What about the April? When is the other one coming before us?
That was in today's purchasing agenda.
Oh, it was in
But
today's.
because of the board's schedule, without, the next board meeting is, I believe, the 17th. So that's when it'll come for full action.
Okay. I mean, we could add it to the work session if we need to.
It's not going to make it,
Okay.
the week won't make a difference with this.
Okay.
The other projects, city, we have finalized the city program. We did have a meeting 2 weeks ago with the city advisory group and verbalized what we can provide, and we have another meeting scheduled for Wednesday night to show them visually with some renderings of what a classroom looks like now, what it'll look like when we're done. But our verbalization of what's included in the program was well received.
Okay. We already, the bond refunding update?
Yeah, let me
we
just
already
give the
discussed?
last update. The bonds were sold on February 22nd. We actually closed on the deal where money exchanged hands on the 21st last week. So this case, what happens, the new bonds that were issued, the money received from that goes into an escrow account to pay off the refunded bonds when they come due over the next 12 years. So that deal is done and closed, and the taxpayers are saving some dollars, and as we, as a district are also, so.
Excellent.
And that's the last opportunity we're going to have for refunding, probably for a little while yet. The bonds we just issued a year ago, the new 175 million, can be refunded at any time. However, the rates were lower than they are now. It's not likely we're going to see lower rates going, at least in the near future. So it's not likely we're going to refund that issue anytime soon. And all the other old issues, this is the last old issue that was available to refund. So we shouldn't see any refunding, as I mentioned, for several years here yet.
And the bond refunding benefits are really benefits that are going to the taxpayers.
Yeah, ultimately.
Because the taxpayers are paying less than
Yep.
that we had been charging them, so.
Exactly.
Discuss what's
Yeah,
happening.
there's a couple of things on policy, actually. One thing came up since we met on Thursday. First is the enhancement millage, and as we mentioned a little while, just a few minutes ago, it's worth 2.5% of our fund balance, about $3.5 million. It's beneficial to the whole county. I know at the last board meeting, in addition to what we've talked about already from the state, you got the update from John on Trump's cuts to the education budget. So more than ever, we need these additional dollars. We're in full attack mode. Calling and canvassing campaign have started over the last several days, and we'll continue on. We have, I think, 2 more neighborhood canvasses scheduled for the week, 2 weekends just prior to the vote, to get the vote out, and many people in the district are participating in that on their own time, of course, on weekends or after hours. So it's just like the bond issue. We're all out there and knocking on doors and telling people why they need to vote yes for this particular enhancement millage and what it all means too, because a lot of people are confused about just
We're
what it is.
explaining what it means.
What it means.
If you vote yes.
Exactly.
The,
So- Yep. And then the other thing is, I just found out on Friday that we believe that tomorrow morning, at the state level, both the House and Senate will have their versions of the budget out. So, perhaps the work session, you want an update on that, I'll leave it up to you,
Okay.
Dr. Baker, but it's supposed to be out tomorrow morning. So, and what we're hearing early, at least, is that the 55 million, you may recall, that the governor recommended they take out of shared time, which essentially cuts that in half, gets put back in. We are hearing that the $50 per high school student may go away, but they may put actually more money into the foundation allowance too. So that's just what we're hearing. We'll see what happens when things come out tomorrow. And then, of course, from that point, it'll have to go to committee to get reconciled out sometime after the revenue estimating conference in mid-May. So again, we won't know the final budget till June 1st, thereabouts. We'll have some sense of what the House and Senate thinks, at least this week, it sounds like. So.
Yeah, I think it would be, I don't think that we need a real detailed thing, but I think that, I wouldn't mind seeing, I think that you've done this in the past, like just a one-pager that says, Snyder's budget,
Yep.
legislative budget, where we're at
And
currently.
the key issues, yes.
So how it may just impact, because I know that there's going to be this, and then we got the enhancement millage, so there's a lot of stuff up in the air
It
as
is.
we discuss contracts and all these
Yes.
other things. It might be nice to have at least a range of best case, worst case
Sure.
scenarios, and which would, if we have both of those, if we have both the governor and the legislator, we could at least figure out which is the
Exactly.
worst of the, and at least consider that to be
Right.
Yeah.
the minimum planning, so, so yeah, it'd be nice to have that at that work session. I mean, I know that, Dr. Falk would make that agenda, but it would be nice to just plan on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have it available certainly.
So-
If it comes this week, so.
So-
That's all I have under the policy section, so if there's any other questions?
All right. Okay, well, then, we're adjourned.
Adjourned, thank you.